So, welcome everyone to Midweek with Max. I'm Rick, joined by Joshua, JCV, John Greenwood, and of course our co-founder Max Sanchez. I just want to remind everyone that the JCV's HIPPO logo contest is ongoing, and following Midweek with Max, there is a Rumble game on the Here server. I didn't forget, Alex. So without further ado, let me kick it over to Max for the weekly update, and then we'll go into some exciting news.
All right, sounds like a plan. So, quick on the update side, the pop points to liquid Hemi tokens conversion is going to be launching very soon. We didn't get it out last week because we've been working on V2 testnet deployments, which are moving along, but there's a lot of database upgrades. And we had a large Bitcoin testnet 3 reorg that threw a wrench into some things. So, got a little bit delayed on that, but we are getting V2 rolled out. So, it's rolled out to some of our infrastructure right now for testnet. We're getting the final nodes upgraded in the next day or two here. And then we will be, like I mentioned last week, rolling out instructions for people to upgrade to V2. It's a non-breaking change, so you don't have to upgrade immediately if you're running a testnet node. There will be a breaking change for the mainnet Fusaka update. So we'll be announcing that probably in 7 to 10 days with instructions. If you're running a mainnet node, you will have to adopt that update for post-Fusaka compatibility. But instructions will come for that. V2 is optional. It's only if you want the performance improvements, but with the Fusaka upgrade, you're going to get V2 plus Fusaka readiness. And so you can, if you're running a mainnet node, you can just wait for all of that to be combined together instead of trying to deploy V2 first and then do a second upgrade for Fusaka readiness. Beyond that, Veriblock stuff still coming. Sorry again for the delays. Again, a lot of things moving around last week have gotten in the way of that, but it is still coming soon. I'm hoping to get that out this week. Been making a lot of progress on ZK provability. So we got a big chunk of the indexing work needed in TBC for ZK provability, mostly done, just doing some testing and bug fixes on it. I've also started on some of the Rust side of the ZK provability and pulling out some of the EVM and optimism style derived L2s, pulling out the code paths for ZK proving a lot of those components in a way that's more modular, and we can reuse it and use it in a modular way so we can build different proofs for different systems. Because as mentioned in previous weeks, the ZK provability is sort of a nebulous thing where the ZK provability and ZK settlement to Ethereum looks a little different than the ZK provability needed for the HBitVM Bitcoin tunneling system. And so having that composability lets us construct different proofs for different things, proving different things about Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Hemi. So making progress there as well. And with that, we will, excuse me, I have a little bit of a head cold. We will get into what Rick mentioned, which is the new section, which is we're going to talk about Hemi BTC kind of more broadly. Obviously, people here are familiar with it. You've heard me talk about it for ad nauseum on the tech side for HBitVM and how that's going to work, and ZK provability and how we can leverage Bitcoin and Ethereum security together to make a more secure ZK proof of Bitcoin state for the purposes of BitVM style settlement. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on the softer side of it, more on the looking at kind of the grand plan for where Hemi BTC fits into the ecosystem. Some of the upcoming products we have on the EVM/HVM side for Hemi BTC, some potential current and then future yield opportunities and ways to make that yield more accessible for users who don't want to learn a bunch of complicated protocols and manage risk and understand all these DeFi gadgetry. Basically, just creating an easy way to onboard Bitcoin, earn predictable yield on it, and in doing so, feedback into the Hemi economic model. And then also wanted to talk a little bit about how adoption of Hemi BTC beyond just what you can do with it on Hemi, but across the entire DeFi ecosystem, how that feeds back into Hemi's overall economic model and ultimately VE Hemi, and how people with VE Hemi can participate in making Hemi BTC more decentralized as we roll out features like HBitVM and then some stuff on the MinerFi side that I'll briefly talk about. As Rick mentioned, today is going to be a little bit more high level, looking at different components that are working on, different things that we're going to be launching soon, and sort of the overall vision of Hemi BTC now, tomorrow, a year from now. And then next week, we'll dive into more tech details on how some of these products work. And yeah, so that's sort of the overview. One announcement of something that is live, but not easy to use unless you're a DeFi and smart contract expert, but it will be usable by everyone very soon, is that Hemi BTC is now supported as a OFT across, let's make sure I get the list right, Binance Chain, Base, Ethereum, Optimism, and Arbitrum. And so you can take Hemi BTC using the OFT standard and bridge it over to those networks and use it in DeFi protocols over on those chains. It's if you want to use that today, you'd have to go and interact with the contracts manually, which you can do, but not advisable. But it will be listed in Stargate soon. So in the relatively near future, a week to 2 weeks, depending on what their timeline is for verifying the contracts and getting it added to the UI, you'll be able to, like I said, bridge Hemi BTC to all those different chains. And over time, we're also going to be working on initiatives that make Hemi BTC interesting on those chains. So ways to get Hemi BTC branched out from just being the Bitcoin representative token used on the Hemi network to more broadly getting it out into the ecosystem for tons of people and other protocols who haven't heard of Hemi to get exposure to it, use it, benefit from it. One of the other major initiatives, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's something that we're starting to push a lot harder on internally, and you should see some stuff on this in the relatively near future, is getting a lot more liquidity for a lot of different types of Bitcoin tokens and pairing that with Hemi BTC. So basically, now that we have a lot of the all of the dependencies for things like Sushi's cross-chain swaps enabled and active on the network, building a lot of Bitcoin liquidity basically allows us to give people ways to easily get into Hemi BTC from other Bitcoin tokens in the ecosystem, whether that be Wrapped Bitcoin, Threshold Bitcoin, Coinbase's CBBTC, some of the LSTs and LRTs, giving users that easier path to, you don't have to just have native Bitcoin and then tunnel it through the standard tunneling system. If you're already in DeFi with a Bitcoin representative token, this lets you get into Hemi BTC a lot easier. So we're working on that. And the benefits there is not just for Hemi BTC itself and adoption of it, but also for generating more protocol fees, which feeds into the overall economic model. By amassing that liquidity, you could have a user who's on Arbitrum want to trade wrapped Bitcoin for Coinbase Bitcoin. And if Hemi can provide the best liquidity for that swap, that could occur cross-chain from Arbitrum through Hemi using Hemi's liquidity, generating fees for people who are providing Bitcoin-based liquidity on Hemi, and then bringing those assets back to Arbitrum for the user to benefit from. And so there's a lot of cool things on that side that are sort of surrounding this whole liquidity push. So it's making Hemi BTC a lot easier to get into and out of for users, but also B, leveraging that as a way to provide more liquidity on Bitcoin pairs to the ecosystem and then generate additional revenue that eventually feeds into the economic model through transaction fees into Hemi as a whole. So let's see, that was the Hemi BTC multi-chain OFT. One of the other things, and you'll hear a lot more details on this next week, so stay tuned for an announcement, blog post, and some other stuff coming out. But we're working on making Hemi BTC more of its own standalone product. And so instead of it just being, oh, that's the Bitcoin on Hemi, we're looking at really turning Hemi BTC into that is the Bitcoin of choice that people use across the DeFi ecosystem. And so as part of that, we're going to be working on launching a analytics dashboard, analytics and transparency dashboard. So being able to see how much is in circulation, where it is, how it's being used, seeing the backing, the custodianship of the underlying Bitcoin, how that system works. So a lot more sort of public visibility instead of it just being a token that you see on a couple DeFi sites in the Explorer, really making that into a experience around Hemi BTC so you can understand how it's flowing, where it is, what it's doing, how it's being used, how it's backed, all of that good stuff. And the other big thing is we're doing a push on something called MinerFi. And this kind of actually goes a bit beyond MinerFi itself. MinerFi is a sort of new term in the industry for things that revolve around mining, and in this instance, around Bitcoin mining. So being able to take Bitcoin that is being mined and then do something interesting with it in DeFi chutes and ladders versus the current model, which is mining pool. You point your ASIC to a mining pool, you get some Bitcoin, you withdraw it to your Bitcoin wallet, or they automatically withdraw Bitcoin wallet once a day, and then it sits there for 3 years until you sell it. So with MinerFi and the MinerFi Bitcoin onboarding protocol we're working on. It's going to basically act as a fast onboarding and immediate entryway into DeFi for Bitcoin from mining pools. So you'd be able to go to a mining pool, and there's sort of two parts to this, and we'll get into more details next week on some of the technical details on how these things will work. But you can think of it as there's two ways that you could use this at a mining pool. So if you're using a mining pool that doesn't do some sort of deep integration with the system, you would be able to basically register a Bitcoin address on the Hemi network, and that Bitcoin address, whenever Bitcoin's sent to it, it would automatically be onboarded from Bitcoin to Hemi BTC through this sort of quick bridge system. And then you would be able to configure it to put that Hemi BTC into different DeFi protocols or do whatever you want with it. So you could have something set up where you register a Bitcoin address and you set it so that the Bitcoin is automatically converted to stablecoins every time it's deposited, or it's put into Spectra, or it's put into a Bitcoin staking vault of some sort. And the deeper integration is that mining pools could offer this as a sort of a one-click experience for users, where the mining pool would register a Bitcoin address on your behalf. They would configure it and manage it on their side in their account, and they would be able to on-chain change allocations of what happens when the BTC gets converted to Hemi BTC when it's withdrawn from the pool. So you'd be able to do stuff like, imagine going to your favorite Bitcoin mining pool and then just configuring, hey, instead of withdrawing to this Bitcoin address, here's my EVM address, and I want my Bitcoin to automatically be staked every 24 hours. And then the pool behind the scenes, they would be able to manage the DeFi strategy router, which takes that Bitcoin as it's emitted from the pool and automatically converts to Hemi BTC in that strategy owned by your address. So there's a lot of cool things on the MinerFi side that enables. And the reason I said it goes beyond MinerFi is you could also use that exact same system for onboarding Bitcoin from other sources. So you could have, you could withdraw Bitcoin directly from your exchange to this Bitcoin address, and then it automatically, again, gets put into these DeFi chutes and ladders on behalf of your EVM address. And then a year from now, you can go in and withdraw it, and you've got not only the Bitcoin that you either minted or withdrew from the exchange or whatever, but also the yield on top of it that was generated by whatever strategy you selected for it to be put into. So a lot of cool stuff on that side. And then just looking through my notes here to make sure I cover everything. The other major thing that I wanted to at least give a high level overview of is how Hemi BTC feeds back into Hemi's overall token economics model, the Hemi staking, economic security. And so the way that system looks is you're all familiar with Hemi BTC and the sort of roadmap for it, which goes from our current, decentralized vault custodianship system to eventually HBitVM. Especially with HBitVM and with the MinerFi system, there's going to be need for economic security that is provided by VE Hemi stakers. And so people who stake a sufficient amount of VE Hemi, and again, we'll announce actual economics, how many tokens to do participate in which parts of the protocol. That'll be announced in the future as we finalize some things on the economic model and security analysis. But super high level, VE Hemi stakers will be able to participate in 3 different parts of the Hemi BTC system, using their VE Hemi as this economic collateral to secure those protocols and earn revenue from inflows and outflows of Bitcoin in and out of the system. And so the first is HBitVM covenant emulation. So stake VE Hemi, restake it into the covenant emulation system, and then participate in end-of-end security system for pre-signing the whole BitVM transaction graph. And then you would receive a portion of the fees for a user depositing into a BitVM vault. Same with withdrawals. A portion of withdrawals would also go to the original covenant emulators. So you get initial revenue from participating in the system, but also revenue long-term from when that vault is eventually unwound. You could also be an operator. That's going to require a lot more VE Hemi, but those operators are the ones that provide the liquidity for allowing or facilitating withdrawals from those HBitVM vaults, and they would receive a larger portion of the deposit and withdrawal fees in the vault system. And then third, and this would be something that's somewhere in between the VE Hemi requirements for being a covenant emulator and for being an operator, would be people who want to participate in providing liquidity or in being a active participant in the MinerFi custodianship system, which is going to be based, and again, we're not getting too deep into the technical weeds today. We're going to do that next week on all these different protocol items, but essentially running a daemon and participating in a threshold signature scheme that secures the sort of transient Bitcoin liquidity going in and out of the minify fast Bitcoin bridge. And then, of course, there's fee generation from that goes back to VE Hemi stakers who are participating in that protocol. And a portion of the fees from all of those systems will also go into general protocol revenue, and that would get distributed overall to VE Hemi stakers in general, whether they're participating in some or all parts of the Hemi BTC decentralized participant system, or whether they're just taking VE Hemi and maybe participating in governance or doing something else like running a sensor. So that's sort of the high level of Hemi BTC. And as we get Hemi BTC more evolved, more used across more protocols in the entire ecosystem, that creates more demand for inflows and outflows, which creates more fees, generates more protocol revenue, generates more revenue for VE Hemi stakers participating in the system. And so after that sort of initial decentralization, bootstrapping of each of those components, it should be sort of a self-feeding system where we get fees, which bring in more people, providing more economic security and decentralization, which makes the product more secure, more interesting to be used as the version of Bitcoin that people want to use across the DeFi ecosystem. And then that feeds into more utilization, therefore more fees, so on and so forth. So that's sort of the grand plan for Hemi BTC. Some of these pieces we've talked about in previous AMAs or blog posts or presentations at conferences or whatever, but just wanted to give an overview of some of the stuff that we haven't really talked about, namely MinerFi. Obviously, Hemi BTC is an OFT and sort of this multi-chain push, and also the analytics transparency dashboard and sort of turning Hemi BTC into its own product, and really just cover how that ties overall back into Hemi. If you're not using Hemi BTC, but you're a VE Hemi staker, what does that mean for you? How does that feed into future protocol revenue, future VE Hemi utility? And so with that, I think that covers pretty much everything. The end goal is once we get to HBIT VM, once we get this MinerFi easy Bitcoin onboarding and automatic Bitcoin DeFi shoots and ladders system together, we can really package Hemi BTC as the best Bitcoin you can use across the entire DeFi ecosystem. And one of the cool things, and I've talked about this ad nauseum in the past, but it's still an exciting point to bring up. A lot of the teams who are working on BitVM style custodianship for Bitcoin, they're doing it in isolation just on top of Bitcoin as a L2 to Bitcoin itself. And they're not really bringing it natively to the Ethereum ecosystem. And so beyond just the benefits we get and increased vault security and so on and so forth from being able to leverage both Bitcoin proof of work and Ethereum proof of stake together to make the entire system more secure, we also, because we do have native settlement to Ethereum, and in the future, before HBIT VM, that'll be upgraded to full ZK settlement. You'll essentially have a full transit route of Bitcoin from the Bitcoin network, from native Bitcoin through Hemi to Ethereum, to the Ethereum L2 ecosystem, completely secured by zero knowledge proofs at every step in that process. So other chains that are building just on top of Bitcoin in isolation, they're Bitcoin representative tokens, even if the underlying, you almost can't call it custodianship. It's custodianship in the same way the optimism style settlement contracts on Ethereum custody tokens. But the other projects working on that sort of a Bitcoin custodianship in air quotes model, once that Bitcoin leaves that network, it has to go over other protocols that introduce additional security complications. So, okay, you have Bitcoin securely bridged to Bitcoin L2, but then you want to take it to Ethereum. You're now introducing reliance on this intermediate bridging system that you're using to get it from that Bitcoin L2 to the Ethereum ecosystem. Whereas with Hemi being both a Bitcoin and an Ethereum L2, that entire transit route is secured by the same ZK settlement technology. So I think with that, there's a lot of exciting stuff. Stay tuned for more announcements on that. Some stuff's going to be coming out next week and into early December. And one of those things is going to be, and again, not getting too deep into the weeds on this yet, but we'll talk about this more next week, is a staked Hemi BTC product, basically the ability to take Hemi BTC, and instead of having to understand, this is kind of where I started this whole spiel, instead of having to understand all these complex DeFi components and risk and this, that, the other, it'll be a simple product where you can just put in your Hemi BTC, the protocol puts it to work wherever there's good yield with low risk, and that's all abstracted away from you. So you just set it and forget it, and then come however often you want and collect the staking revenue that's being generated by that staked Hemi BTC vault mechanism. So more details on that next week. But I think with that, I covered all of the points I wanted to get through. I don't know if anyone else on the team wanted to add anything to any of these items, either John Greenwood on the DeFi side, Bitcoin yield, or any of the engineering on some of the either minify components, OFT tokens, or long-term HBIT VM model. But with that, I will turn it over to anyone who wants to add to that. And if not, back to Rick to continue with our scheduled programming.
All right, it looks like it's back to me. Okay. Um, well, let's get into questions. What do we got here, Josh? Looks like updates. Any news regarding Hemi Station?
I don't think there's anything to share at the moment. We did get some good ideas from the community for stuff we could do around Hemi Station, so we are reviewing those and looking at which ones are practical and interesting to do, but I don't think there's any concrete update to give on that at the moment.
All right. That Discord channel is still open, and the team is actively reviewing it. So if you do have ideas for Hemi Station, please continue to populate that channel. Moving on to our next question. Oh, didn't see this one coming. When will the OG role be available?
It's still in the works. There's some final items that Josh was tackling, and he's been pulled away to some other more pressing engineering stuff to get V2 shipped and some other items. So very soon, but there is still a little bit of engineering work that has to happen there.
All right. So yes, the OG role has been delayed, but it is coming. So it's not canceled or anything like that. So everyone chill. It's coming. It's it's being worked on. Um, are there any VBK updates you can share for holders? I think you covered it briefly, but it's come up a few times in chat as well. So if you have any VBK updates, Max, that you could share.
Really nothing beyond last week. Again, apologies for the delay, but there's been other items that have come up that have taken priority over it. But we are trying to get it out as soon as possible. So again, I know I said this last week. We should have something up in the very near future, hopefully before the end of this week.
All right. Um, what has affected the price of the Hemi token recently?
I mean, there's a lot of factors. I'm not going to get into uh, speculation, and I'm not a markets guy, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that. But standard supply demand overall, there's been a slump in the general crypto market, which I don't think has helped pretty much any token. And again, we're in the early days of the chain, and so naturally, early on, there's a lot of tokens that are going out for a lot of different things, and so that does introduce more supply on the street in the early days versus how many tokens you'd have coming out per month in the later, more mature stages of the economic model. But otherwise, can't really talk too much to that because A, don't really know, and then B, that's not really the intention of this AMA.
Thank you. On to the V-Hemi section. How much V-Hemi will be required to run a sequencer?
So we haven't decided on this yet, and this sort of I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here and talk more generally about some VE Hemi future plans and features that feed back into this, and eventually we'll get back to the answer to the question. So VE Hemi, it's not going to be based on just the underlying Hemi token amount. It's going to be based on the VE Hemi stake weight. And so that is to say, the way that if you're familiar with the VE curve model or other similar vote escrow token models, basically you have the number of tokens you're staking, and then you also have the period of time that you're staking them over. And so you can have one token staked for a year, and that would be the equivalent stake weight, at least at the beginning, as two tokens staked for 6 months or half tokens staked for 2 years, for example. And over time, because those have different schedules, they're not going to stay perfectly in that ratio as they get closer to the end of their missions, or the end of their unlocks, rather. For example, the 6 month position at the last week is going to have almost negligible weight, whereas the one Hemi token for a year at the 6 month period is still going to have half of its stake weight. So there's a decay curve you got to take into account there. But It's going to be based on the VE Hemi stake weight, and I mentioned some other mechanics that we'd like to introduce to VE Hemi that kind of feed back into this. So the first one is being able to combine VE Hemi positions. So this is something we've, I think there was a question about this on either the previous AMA or the one before it. But anyway, basically, if people have multiple positions and they combine them together to one single position that then they could use. Right now would be just for making things easier for collecting rewards. You don't have to do it on one position. But as we get into using VE Hemi as economic collateral for sequencing and HBIT VM covenant emulation and running an operator and a publisher and a batcher and providing the cross-chain liquidity and so on and so forth, those things really need the ability for people to be able to merge those positions together in some way so that they can have single position that's bigger that they participate in those protocols with, instead of having to have some convoluted system where like they restake a bunch of smaller positions and then the protocol has to check the weight of all those positions and different unlock schedules. So we will be adding some sort of feature to combine VE Hemi NFT positions in some way. Like I mentioned last time I answered the question on this, it's a little more complicated than just adding the two positions together because every position has a different unlock schedule. So there need to be some way of blending the two schedules of the NFTs together. And so we have some ideas there, but still need to think through that a bit more. But that's one of the pieces is you will have to have a single VE Hemi NFT position that has enough stake weight to participate in the protocol. And then the other part is, so we have the VE Hemi position combination and then VE Hemi redeemability. So we're looking at a mechanic for allowing early exits of VE Hemi positions for the underlying Hemi tokens with a haircut. So, and again, these are not even final numbers. This is just purely for exemplary purposes, but it may work, for example, like you have 100 tokens in a VE Hemi NFT position, and you have 1 year remaining on the lockup. And if you want to do an early withdrawal, you can get out 75 tokens or 75% of the position. Just as an example, those are not the numbers that are actually going to be used in the system. But that also feeds into the underlying economic value that can be recovered from a staked VE Hemi position in a protocol that needs to, instead of just slash the user for misbehavior, actually needs to be able to recover funds and then use them for making some other protocol participant whole or paying for some other protocol participant to do the job that the previous VE Hemi position holder should have done but didn't do. And so for sequencing, that's not relevant, but more broadly for this question, for other parts of the protocol, especially like providing cross-chain liquidity, that will also play a factor in the amount of Hemi tokens, where the stake weight of VE Hemi is the amount of liquid Hemi tokens that the protocol can recover and then use to, say, make somebody who's doing a cross-chain transaction whole by buying the assets on the open market instead of them being provided by the VE Hemi staked LP in the protocol. So for sequencing, I don't have an exact number, but it will probably be somewhere in the range of $1,000 worth of Hemi tokens staked over a year, something in that ballpark, but we haven't finalized a number. Part of it is when we get to decentralized sequencing, we want to do it with the Ethereum style proof of stake with obviously some modifications to make it work on an L2. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because you can get a lot more decentralization. And so this will let us basically allow a lot of users with smaller positions to participate. We also don't want too many users because, like Ethereum would not want to enable 0.01 ETH staking, for example, to be a validator because there is an upper limit to what that system can handle. And so the final decision on that number is going to be based on looking at what the target number of validators we want is and running some economic analysis of how much VE Hemi we think is going to be staked overall in the system. It's not going to be pegged, obviously, to a USD price. I'm giving that as just sort of ballpark how we're thinking about it economically. But yeah, the final number of that will be based on making sure that the protocol is going to stay under that upper limit of validators that the staking system can handle, which theoretically is several million, but in practice, we probably want to keep it to 100,000 or less, especially in the early days. And that is subject to change over time as well. And also I guess like Ethereum staking now, but unlike Ethereum staking as of 6 months ago, The weight of a sequencer will be based on the total weight of the VE Hemi position. So instead of it just being you either are or are not a sequencer, you have to be above a certain threshold to be a sequencer, but then any amount above that threshold in VE Hemi position is going to give you higher weighting in the sequencer pool. And so if you had a VE Hemi position that's double the minimum size to be a sequencer, then you would have twice the probability of being selected as a validator to propose a particular block, and you'd have double the rewards from signing attestations on that block. So a little bit of a roundabout answer, but I think somewhere in the ballpark, probably of $1,000 worth of Hemi tokens, something like that, staked for a year. And it may change over time. If it changes over time, it'll probably be growing to limit the number of validators if there's too many validators in the system for the overall technology to efficiently handle. And the weight in the sequencing pool will vary based on your VE Hemi positions, stake weight versus the relative minimum weight to participate.
All right. We have a couple more What the? Oh my God. Sorry. This piece of shit squirrel just knocked over one of my planters and broke it. And it's like looking at me as if it's like sending me a message. Apologies for that. That was so random. It's like trying to intimidate me. Okay, more VE Hemi questions. How often will VE Hemi rewards be distributed?
So we haven't committed to an exact frequency yet. At the moment, probably monthly, and then eventually faster than that as we automate more parts of the system and it gets turned over more to governance control. So probably roughly monthly, but we've not formally committed to a frequency of staking rewards yet.
All right. Speaking of rewards, is it possible to add a button to the portal to claim all the VE Hemi position rewards in one transaction?
At the moment, we would have to probably do some changes on the smart contract side. And I think we talked about this last week, but I'll go over it again. So basically, the current reward calculator for VE Hemi is relatively gas intensive, and so because it's basically running a daily computation of your position's total stake weight versus the entire stake weight of the system. And so for longer claim periods for NFTs that haven't had their rewards claimed for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, uh, you start to run into a single claim taking quite a bit of gas. And so it's hard to bundle a lot of those into one transaction. The other thing is on a tech detail, multi-call 3 doesn't let you, as an EOA, pass through message.sender with a delegate call to the contract you're actually calling. And so if you had positions owned by a smart contract, like they were in a Gnosis safe or something like that, those theoretically could be claimed in batches using multi-call with a delegate call. But from EOAs, that's not currently possible. And so we would have to make some changes to the underlying contract to account for that and allow multiple claims. And again, that's where things get a little bit messy with the gas limit. So it is something we do eventually want to add, although I think the better solution to that is probably letting people merge VE Hemi NFTs and being able to, for the most part, keep a single position or a small number of positions for different staking periods that they want to be exposed to.
What are the benefits and reasons to stake Hemi tokens?
Yeah, good question. So staking Hemi tokens makes you a VE Hemi system participant. And so for anyone who's not familiar with the mechanics, you stake Hemi tokens for any period from 6 days to 4 years, and you get back a transferable VE Hemi position. So you can go and transfer it to another wallet. You can sell it to somebody else. You still have liquidity on the position, but not liquidity to get at the underlying tokens. And again, like I mentioned, we are considering a future mechanic for that redeemability with a haircut, but that's a separate discussion. Staking Hemi and VE Hemi exposes you to VE Hemi staking rewards. So we announced, and I think somebody may have posted Alex just posted the economic model blog post. So that's a great read for sort of the early days of VE Hemi rewards, basically taking protocol revenue and then converting that to Hemi BTC and Hemi tokens. and then those are distributed to VE Hemi participants. VE Hemi, right now we're in sort of the bootstrapping phase of VE Hemi, so the rewards at the moment are just protocol fees coming in and then getting converted to, like I said, Hemi BTC and Hemi tokens and getting distributed to VE Hemi holders on a not on a daily basis for claims, but based on daily stake weight of your position versus the total pool. In the future, so we're in the bootstrapping phase with those initial incentives to get more people staking VE Hemi. And the goal of that is to amass a lot of economic security in VE Hemi positions that then we can use to decentralize other parts of the protocol. And those will introduce additional revenue sources for the protocol itself in general, which goes to VE Hemi stakers regardless of participation in different protocols, but also gives VE Hemi position holders the ability to additionally participate in those other protocols, do a little bit more work, whether that's running a daemon or providing liquidity in other assets or other things of that nature, and be able to earn additional revenue that's created by those different protocols. So I already talked about this earlier, but for example, with HBIT VM and the MinerFi Bitcoin Fast Bridge, those are both going to generate deposit and withdrawal fees, and a portion of those would go to anyone with a VE Hemi position who's participating in securing those protocols. Similarly with sequencing, once we have decentralized sequencing, VE Hemi participants who choose to opt into the sequencing protocol and become a sequencer would be earning sequencer revenue and a portion of the on-chain fees that are generated in the blocks that they create for the network. As we expand out, there's going to be future stuff in Chain Builder, so running part of the shared sequencing, shared DA system. That would be contributing compute power and bandwidth. You need VE Hemi positions as collateral, and you'd get additional revenue from L3s that are leveraging that system and paying fees for DA and shared sequencing. So as we decentralize the protocol, in summary, there's going to be all of these different value generating components of the protocol that's secured by VE Hemi economic collateral and whose revenue that's generated mostly from new value creation, like fees for people onboarding, offboarding Bitcoin, fees from L3s using parts of the Chain Builder ecosystem. Those will get funneled to the VE Hemi participants who also participate in those additional protocols. Yep, and not just building the tech and getting the smart contracts audited and writing the daemons and whatever, but with VE Hemi in particular, we need, from an economic perspective, we also need to bootstrap that economic security. So, we couldn't launch, even if all the code was written and everything was done, tested, audited for decentralized sequencing, for example, we couldn't launch that if there's nobody in VE Hemi to participate in the protocol. So there's an order of operations. We got to get VE Hemi up and running, which it has been since TGE. And then we need to get a lot of economic security in it, a lot of Hemi staked into it. That was part of the motivation for giving participants from Testnet and mainnet season 1 additional rewards in VE Hemi so that they have stake positions and could participate in these things as we roll them out. But we need to amass that economic security to a point where we can actually launch decentralized protocols that leverage it and have enough economic security for those systems to function correctly. You can't decentralize sequencing and have $100 of collateral in the system that's preventing misbehavior. So there's an order of operations not just on building the tech, but also on getting that sufficient economic security to power all of the decentralized components that we want to eventually power the VE Hemi. The other thing that I forgot to mention, we do briefly mention it in the economic model, and we'll have more details on this in the relatively near future. I'm not sure the exact timeline for this piece, but we are also at some point going to introduce a dual staking model. So basically, stake VE Hemi or stake Hemi into VE Hemi, stake Hemi BTC into a staked Hemi BTC product, and you would be able to maximize the rewards you earn from staking your Hemi BTC based on the amount of VE Hemi you have in the system. And the purpose of that is to economically align the people who are seeking coin yield from the Hemi ecosystem with the overall health of Hemi in general and the economic security that's powering the system. And so more details on that at some point in the near future, but that'll be another benefit of VE Hemi staking if you're also looking to maximize BTC yield.
All right. We are moving on to our final section, tunneling. Why is tunneling USDC to and off Hemi so complicated?
I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it doesn't go through the normal flow that most other token tunneling does take. So this is both for USDC and USDT. For those tokens, we chose to use layer 0 instead of the canonical tunnel because people need to be able to move stablecoins around a lot faster from Ethereum, from other Ethereum L2s, from other non-EVM chains. And so using the OFT standard for stablecoins is sort of a necessary thing in today's ecosystem for people being able to easily bring stablecoins over, use them, provide liquidity, rebalance positions, things of that nature. So for that reason, we decided instead of tunneling USDC and USDT through the canonical Ethereum tunnel, that the sort of quote unquote official versions of those that are used in the ecosystem would be the ones brought over through layer 0 and Stargate, because that's just what you have to do for compatibility with the ecosystem nowadays. So I wouldn't say it's more difficult, but you do have to use Stargate instead of using the canonical tunnel. It's actually easier in some regards in the fact that you don't have to wait for the tunnel, currently 24-hour withdrawal period, in order to get your funds back onto Ethereum. And it also gives you the ability to easily move those stablecoins to and from a lot of different chains, not just Ethereum. And so if you have, USDC on Base, for example, and we were not using the OFT standard versions of USDT and USDC, then you would have to withdraw it from Base back to Ethereum and tunnel it from Ethereum through the canonical tunnel into Hemi, which is an extra step. So it's easier or harder depending on how you look at it, but that's the reason for choosing to bring stablecoins over through layer 0 OFTs instead of doing it through the canonical tunnel.
And one little thing to add there, remember, we need to build like some of the plumbing, like the VE Hemi stuff that would need to be for, being economically attached to the other shit has to come first. We can't go and build everything at one time. So if part of VE Hemi's purpose is to be plumbing, it needs to be in place before we can build stuff like Chain Builder that needs to use it, or some of the decentralized sequencing that would need to use it. So you always have to think about things in terms of what is the order in which you can rationally build it in a way that you're building on things rather than trying to throw everything out there at once.
Speaking of tunnels, what security guarantees are there for the Hemi tunnel?
Good question. There's two parts to this. There's the Bitcoin side of the tunnel and the Ethereum side. So the Ethereum side of the tunnel uses optimism style settlement. In the very near future, that's going to be replaced with full ZK provability. And so in the future, once we get to ZK, we'll also be able to lower that withdrawal delay time from 24 hours down to somewhere in the 2 to 3 hour range, which will be nice. It closely aligns with Bitcoin finality. So basically, Bitcoin finality plus the time to generate a ZK proof will be the ultimate Ethereum tunnel withdrawal time, and it'll be fully secured by ZK proofs. On the Bitcoin tunnel side, right now we have our decentralized vault mechanism. We're working on an upgrade to that to bring in institutional or qualified custodians and as a intermediary as we onboard more Bitcoin into the current system. And then hopefully Q1 of next year, that's going to transition into HIPPO, which will be technically, it's incorrect to say ZK secured Bitcoin in the sense that it's ZK security plus the one of n honesty assumption of HBitVM or BitVM style constructions in general. But that'll be a essentially ZK secured version of Bitcoin where the underlying quote unquote custodianship is powered by on-chain optimistic verification of a ZK proof.
A couple more questions just came in. Another one. Will Hemi's smart contracts be added to the vulnerability disclosure program?
Yes, we actually, funny timing, we were just discussing this and what contracts we want to add, I think on yesterday's engineering stand-up. Short answer, yes. We're deciding on the list. We're not going to cover everything, especially some of the components that are borrowed from other teams. A good example of that is the optimism style settlement contracts for L1. Those things are covered by Optimism's bug bounty program, and we would only be covering any differences between those upstream contracts and modifications we make for specific purposes. So short answer, yes, but it's not going to cover all of the contracts in the ecosystem. There's also some contracts where, security is less important. For example, we're probably not going to have a bug bounty program for, the I broke Sepolia NFT contract, right? But anything that's protocol native and important to the protocol, like the Bitcoin tunnel contracts, VE Hemi, future staked Hemi BTC products, some of the pop payout algorithm, the V2 of the pop payout contract, all of those things that are protocol level important contracts will be covered by the bug bounty program. So timeline of that TBD, but we are working on getting those added.
With Hemi V2 now merged and nearly ready for testnet, what is the biggest technical hurdle the team had to overcome to make it socket compatible? Does this change how we should run our nodes for immediately?
I'm not quite sure what this question's asking. I'm gonna guess. So there was some stuff with the way the pop miner connects and gets information. So now it connects to opgeth and TBC instead of connecting to BFG. And so I think they may be asking a question about like WebSockets versus HTTP requests. So there's one piece we had to do, or we are working on doing right now, which is adding HTTP requests that the V2 pop miner can use so that we can run infrastructure for people who don't want to run their own version of the Hemi stack to run their pop miner off of. There's some reasons for that, especially on the preventing like denial of service attacks, which are more of a problem with WebSocket connections where it's harder to use something like Cloudflare to rate limit and inspect data that the pop miner is sending to the infrastructure we're running. So not sure if that answers the question. There is a component there we have to do in order for us to run the infrastructure to support V2 pop miners who don't want to run their own local stack. But I'm not sure if that's what they meant by socket compatible.
And Josh just shared the pretty picture in chat. Or several pretty pictures in the chat.
There's a couple diagrams in HIPPO 3.
That could be, yeah. I think either what you said or the V2 pop miner connection. It's probably one of those two. I think we covered it.
I mean, you might have read it and not looked at the diagrams. You can go with that. Right, the words in English, forget about those, right?
I think the details of that are in the HIPPO 3 one show. I think that is it's definitely one of the diagrams. I think we had a couple other diagrams. I'm not sure if they made it in, but we definitely do have diagrams for the data flows between pop miner, opgeth, current. Yeah, looks like everything's covered here.
I have staked Hemi BTC /USDC /ETH directly in the Hemi portal. Since we know no incentive season 2 is starting yet, is there any advantage to doing this now?
So high level would definitely recommend doing more active things. Right now, if you're looking for incentives, I would look at the Merkle campaigns. I have a link to those. Let me get the link here. So I would definitely focus on the Merkle campaigns. We'll turn it over to John Greenwood if he wants to talk any more to this, but essentially the Hemi staking in the portal was originally meant as a way to get people to bring assets over and do something with them while they're waiting to have other productive things to do with them with, LPing and X's, LPing and lending protocols, things of that nature. So it's not meant to be a long-term yield source. I'm not sure if we're going to do any like small incentives there just as a small TVL incentive, but yeah, I'll turn it over to John to speak more to that.
Yeah, so if you basically to sum it up as Max had highlighted, if you currently have assets still deployed via Hemi staking, would definitely recommend getting into like more productive, positions. Merkle, app.merkle.xyz is kind of the best place to go to see where our liquid rewards are currently being doled out. So currently we have 13 opportunities that are official. There's a couple others that are kind of not on the UI that are by third-party teams. But for example, I think the user had mentioned that they had USDC and ETH. Right now, the USDC vault on Morpho, the Clearstar Morpho vault. It's like 14.97%. We pay out $660 worth of Hemi and USDC every day on those rewards. A little bit better than that, on there's additional positions, primarily like a lot of the Hemi and Hemi BTC pairs. We are very, very high APY right now, almost 160% on that, as well as the ETH Hemi position. But yeah, in short, I mean, I would really be looking there to find much better opportunity right now that has productivity to it. And stay tuned for more pointing towards future seasons or other opportunities that are not all liquid. So once we have more to announce there, we will. And I think you can make a calculated decision on which one you'd like to stick with. But as it stands right now, even simple lending markets that have like supply side only rewards, very straightforward, very easy for the user, and you can grab anywhere from 15 to 30%. So would highly recommend looking at those on Merkle.
All right. Thank you, John. Your PFP is the most distracting thing I've ever seen. And whenever you talk, it looks like Tupac just comes out of like the left side of the screen and then stands there for a minute.
Yeah, I think that's hilarious. So I have never paid for Discord until until like for Hemi stuff. And I got it for free for like 2 years for some reason. I don't know how. So the other day I was just like, hey, do you want to unlock Tupac that just bursts out of your picture with a gavel? I was like, yeah, sure, dude, totally. So yeah, that's my new flair. Just love it or leave it. Apparently there's a game that's on AI that you Tupac is the judge, or maybe it's Snoop Dogg. Actually, I think it's Snoop Dogg that's like a judge, and that's what they gave it away for. So you like state your case to AI, and yeah, and somehow I ended up with that. I have no affiliation and nothing to do with it. Have never played. Yeah, man. Yeah, all I know is they keep giving me free stuff that I usually never use, but every once in a while it's something really weird and wacky. So got to go with it.
That's incredible. I am so into that. I wish I had Tupac in my PFP.
I have no idea. I do not understand Discord.
I fully support this. But just as a disclaimer, Hemi has no connection to either Snoop Dogg or Tupac, at least at this current state. That is the end of questions, but I have one more note that says reminder of upcoming rate limits question mark.
Oh yeah, that's a good one to talk about here. So right now, the public RPC that we run is not rate limited in any appreciable way. There's some like denial of service stuff applied to it, but we are going to start rate limiting the official Hemi RPC endpoints that we run both on testnet and mainnet. And so they'll still be usable for anyone who wants to connect your MetaMask to it or do some basic testing of some smart contracts. But for anyone who's running a high bandwidth application that's sending tons of RPC requests, you will want to start migrating to one of the third-party providers like QuickNode, DIN, DRPC, who provide much bigger rate limits. So we're phasing out of being a early stage running everything ourselves to letting the experts in running things like RPC nodes take over and run those components of the network. We'll maintain our official project run RPC endpoint for users, but we want to transition larger users of the RPC off. Right now, just as a funny metric, I think we're over 100 terabytes of bandwidth per month currently on the RPCs. So looking to get that down and get people to migrate to those more institutional grade high bandwidth solutions like those third-party providers, or running your own nodes. That's also another option for people who want high throughput RPC. But so for specifics, on December 1st, we're going to be lowering the rate limit to 600 requests per minute. which is 10 requests per second. But if you burst to 30 and then go down to 5, you have that overall minute of smoothing built in. And then January 1st, I believe we're going to lower it to 120 requests per minute. And that'll be across all RPC endpoints, both for the mainnet rpc.hemi.network and the testnet.rpc.hemi.network endpoints.
Well, I think that brings us to the end. A couple reminders. We are not affiliated with Tupac. JCV's HIPPO contest is still ongoing. It closes Friday, so if you have not submitted, please submit. JCV will be the final judge on that. Oh, I think JCV left. I was going to ask him to talk about that, but he's not here. So good. All right. And last order of business. Just a fair reminder that there is a Rumble session hosted in the Here server immediately following Midweek with Max, so please go check that out. Thank you all for joining us this week on another Midweek with Max. I will pass it over to the team for outros, but we will see you next week for more incredible updates and a deeper dive on Hemi BTC. So take it away, gang.
All right, awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. As Rick said, we'll be doing a deeper dive into Hemi BTC next week. It keeps getting delayed because I can't put the pen down, but we should be getting the HBIT VM white paper finally out this week. And so assuming that happens, we will have not only talking about Hemi BTC in more detail and with more like concrete stuff to announce and specifics to talk about on next week's Tuesday AMA, but we'll also be scheduling a dedicated tech AMA for HBIT VM specifically, date and time TBD, but stay tuned for that as well. And with that, I will see everyone next week.
Take care, amigos. See you around. Do on-chain stuff. Build cool shit, as JCV would say. And don't forget the contest and the Rumble. Take care, y'all.